So just before we get started, Shane normally presents the Linux Foundation Antitrust Policy Notice, which is up here and is available online at linuxfoundation.org/antitrust policy. And any member of the Linux Foundation can reach out to Shane to get any advice on anything related to antitrust. So let's move on. So today I just wanted to give a bit of a recap of what Dave discussed last time. The link, and these slides will go out later, but the link to the recording from the last meeting is enclosed on the slide deck. Then we're getting to a point where we're getting lots and lots of information from people, and we're kind of wanting to get to a point where we create some form of workshop where we are actually writing and documenting all of these brilliant points down that we're getting from this study group session. And the idea around that workshop is a smaller number of us would kind of just collate everything together and then present back at a subsequent study group session. And we've got a number of people with different backgrounds here, and again, we want to bring that community spirit that OpenChain has to, like I say, capture everything and then present back. And as I said at the start, Dave was going to be hosting this session, and so I kind of don't really have much in the way of what I wanted to get out of it, apart from maybe just a few more stimulating questions to carry on the conversation around AI and compliance in the open source space. And again, this information will help us feed back into the workshop and the collateral around creating an open source agreement amongst our groups. So feel free to chip in and discuss. We've got quite a small group today, so any questions or queries or want to start a discussion, then please do. So just as a summary from Dave's presentation last time, and again, the last session was recorded in the slide deck, but OpenChain really is, it's good for understanding the training, the policy and process around open source software. And when we were trying to solve this problem in the past, we came up with ideas around how we can handle upstream and downstream work. But here we've got an AI we're in a new era of AI work. Can we try and implement some form of same solution? So having a goal of compliance artifacts, whether an artifact is a model or any component really of AI, can we deliver it in a consistent way so we can build trust in the supply chain? So if my company is distributing a model, or if you're providing training data to me, we all have similar sort of standards and agreements. Dave also went to talk more about the EU AI Act and China's latest legislation, as well as the NIST framework. And I want to kind of pick up on a couple of the points that were brought out from the session from last time. But as you could see from the list in the top of this slide, there's a whole host of legislation that's coming out. Regulators are really keen to get on board with certain aspects of AI. A number of us went to an Open UK conference from OpenChain a couple of weeks ago, and again we had the opportunity to talk to UK regulators. But where I see OpenChain is we can maybe have some form of global standards, probably a wrong word, but a sort of global agreement across the different jurisdictions, that again we can build trust because we're a well integrated ecosystem. We can't just really be focusing on maybe certain areas. And Dave presented this last slide, of around sort of data and models of different data sets and different sources coming together to make a data set. That data set then is brought into a model. There's training, there's inference, questions around the training data. Maybe the model is learning things and the user is interacting. And we're going to be delivering this model, or maybe we're just a user in this case. So in this scenario, there's different components of the diagram that's shown here that Dave created that we might want to consider. So around the data and around data sets, do we want to set principles behind what good looks like for data sets, whether that's good transparency, or where it has come from, is somebody accountable for it? Equally, we've got models as well, so there's going to be clearly biases and ways we can build trust around models, and that's kind of half or what we're trying to achieve out of this study group. Anyone have any comments so far? Okay. So one thing that I did want to pick up on, that carrying on from the conversation last time with Dave, is kind of what is the concept of an artifact in this case. I'd like to get people's thoughts on, can we try and classify what an artifact is? Equally, what is a high-risk artifact? So the EU AI Act, as some of us know, kind of sort of highlights different profiles for different categories of models. NIST equally highlights certain artifacts can be high risk if they lack transparency or lack an accountable owner. So there's clearly some regulation here around what artifacts can be defined. And when we look at creating some guidance or principles, we're going to want to understand artifacts and maybe high risk artifacts. So kind of open it up for discussion. What do people think when we discuss artifacts and are people concerned with higher risk things? Anyone have any comments they want to add?
Yeah, I'm curious here, just to tease this out a bit. When we're talking about artifacts and high risk, are we referencing the notion that the artifact themselves are high risk, or is that the underlying models are high risk and therefore the artifacts are, acutely important?
I mean, I chose these words on the slide just to stimulate that discussion. The models can be high risk, artifacts might not be high risk. It's just kind of trying to tease out what we want to work on in terms of what artifacts can be.
Yeah, so I think on the risk side, I think one of the most important aspects is disclosure of the intended use of a model, and possibly prohibited uses, and along that conversation, you can disclose things like bias or inefficiencies, and you could allow downstream users to make their own decision. But I think it's important as well to sort of call out particularly high risk areas, just to warn folks that this is not appropriate for X or Y or Z.
And what are people's thoughts on sort of, I'm aware of sort of prohibited use cases for high risk AI artifacts. Do we want to cover those? Do we want to exclude them? Do we want to say, if we sign up to principles, we're not going to be using these AI tools for these prohibitive uses?
Well, this is Vanina. It is my understanding, though I'm not an expert yet on the AI regulation, that the AI regulation will impose obligations on the distributor or the provider of AI artifacts in relation to the use, and that the use made by end users of the AI artifact can also impact on the distributor of such AI artifact if it is high risk or middle risk. So I think it is relevant to address all levels of risk in the artifacts, because there are certain circumstances in which an AI artifact, which implies a high risk, is distributed commercially anyway. And I think it's relevant to control the whole chain, not only in the manufacture, the production of the AI artifact, but also in how the AI artifact is going to be used. And I can think of cases in which an AI artifact could be of high risk, depending not so much of the composition of the AI artifact, but the use given to such AI artifact. So I think it's relevant to address all those things.
Thanks for that. Alice, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I think Vanina probably said what I wanted to say, which is, these things can be somewhat agnostic in a vacuum, and it's very context dependent. One model might have bias in some situations, but not in others, depending on how well it's represented, how well it represents the context, the population it's making decisions for. So, I mean, I'm not totally sure whether the artifacts are the things that define the risk as much as the context.
Well, I agree with you, Alice. That is exactly what I was trying to say. There are certain things that could be distributed as an AI artifact, and it's the consumer or the end user who makes a high risk use of such AI artifact. And it is, I mean, if I understand correctly, and I'm focusing on the AI regulation from the EU because that is the one that I have most knowledge of. The risk assessment is spread out throughout the whole life cycle of an AI artifact, starting from data set and ending on the actual use of the AI artifact. So I think, I'm sorry if I'm not very clear, but this is quite blurry, and I think we should address that the whole chain, the whole life cycle of an AI artifact, from inception and training and calibration to use.
And do you see this slide that I presented just previously kind of covering all of these points?
I don't see, well, I see the user. I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not sure the last portion of the whole life cycle is addressed. I'm worried about the use by the end user because it's quite complicated how to control how the end users use an AI artifact. But I think it's a very complete graph.
To your point, is there anything in the literature or in a white paper that kind of covers the full life cycle? No? Okay. Let's move on. Alice, you've got your hand up again.
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt. I guess one other thought on this is that maybe the risk is aligned with more aligned with how explainable it is, as well as the context. So you need to be able to assess the match between the context and the artifact. Perhaps that's an element to be thinking about.
Indeed. I think a lot of the people that we've been discussing are probably from the Europe and focusing on maybe EU AI Act. I'm interested to hear, the context that we're talking about here about artifacts. Is that covered in the US, Brian, in Japan, Takeshia?
Yeah, so the EU AI Act is extremely important, I think, worldwide. Sort of like a bleeding edge regulation right now. But in the US, I harken back to Dave's slides that you shared on the NIST risk management framework. While it's not a binding regulation, it is it's a framework, obviously, and it provides a lot of context and guidance on some best practices. And I do think it would be an interesting vehicle to establish some artifacts here, given the flexibility of it not being a regulation and also the thoroughness and detail that it dives into.
That sounds promising. Again, if we're going down one area, if certain people have expertise in one act, one bit of jurisdiction, I'm keen to not exclude other areas. Any other points from Japan?
Hi, I'm sorry. I'm sorry because I cannot provide the precise information about
okay.
the Japan
Don't
side.
worry about it.
But
Don't worry.
but
Thanks.
maybe almost all of you know that Japan is also considering about the AI and how to say the AI relating regulations for relating to the EU AI Act and also NIST frameworks.
Thanks for that. Anyone else want to chime in on the sort of artifact concept, high risk, low risk? Okay. I think I had one more question for discussion. This was just a side note. I don't know how many people are aware of SPDX. They have an AI profile. I've got the link here on the screen. This is how they could sort of implement the AI profile, and they highlight kind of certain fields that they would say would be voluntary to sign up to, but it points to some of the points of who is the responsible owner, what was the model trained on, etc. So I include this just for review if you wish.
Matthew, is that linked to kind of how the model cards and data cards would work, the SPDX side of things?
As you raised it, I can open the slide deck for discussion.
I'm just wondering if that's the kind of if they're kind of trying to cover a similar thing.
So SPDX and OpenChain work hand in hand. SPDX really deal with how you can actually implement here. So they are, in their proposed AI profile, they would have a field where it's creator, supplier, package, etc. And there's other things here around specific to AI. And this is, if ARM is sending something to another company, we would fill in these fields. Whereas OpenChain is a bit higher level. It is more around, we have a high risk profile, you should be communicating relevant information to your partners rather than explicitly state what they are.
Okay.
Have people come across the SPDX AI profile before?
I hadn't until you just mentioned it.
No, me neither.
Okay, so I also work in that arena, which is why I kind of thought I'd bring it up. But like I say, this is more when we're further down the line. This is, we could propose saying, if we believe good transparency is important when sharing information in the supply chain, then this is how you could do it. And there are other ways of transferring data, but SPDX is one of them.
Yeah, because I thought that's kind of what model cards were about. Sort of sounds like they're intended to cover a similar thing. I might be wrong.
Can you just expand on model cards?
Well, I've seen the only time I've seen them is in like GitHub repositories when we've been looking at models we might want to bring in, and some of them have like a model card, which is kind of similar to what you've just shown, really, where it sort of explains the different, like, I don't know if it says use cases as much, but it kind of, where the training data's come from. It kind of gives you the kind of history of the model, and they were on that diagram you just showed, that is it the NIST framework thing that was at the beginning of the slides? It had an arrow pointing down to model cards on there. Yeah, the forward again. Not this one. It was the other one. Was it the NIST framework? The one you just went past. Go.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, the next one.
The next
This
one.
one.
Yeah, here. So you've got your
Model card.
data card and your model card. So I just
Yeah.
wondered if there was an overlap between the kind of SPDX, kind of the intention behind that SPDX profile and these model card, that, you know, the purposes of those.
I don't know. That's something I can explore with the team. I think it is.
Yeah, it sounds like it might be.
Yeah,
but,
so
sorry.
sorry to interrupt here. Yeah, so I think that you're spot on here. I think model cards are attempting to convey this information. The problem I'm seeing in the industry right now is that they somewhat wander depending on who the model provider is. So some are very detailed, very elaborate. Others are, you know, very topical. And I think SPDX could, you know, come up with certain criteria, both of required and optional fields, so that people have confidence when they get a model card that, okay, someone, you know, intentionally filled out or did not fill out this field, as opposed to just, you know, looking at a model card and saying, I'm not quite sure what I'm getting here. So yeah, I think you're directly spot on here.
Yeah, I was thinking that there's sort of similar. It sounds like SPDX are kind of doing a more kind of thorough version of that, which is a good thing.
They're probably standardizing it. I guess
Yeah.
that's usually their areas.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So I need to actually drop off shortly. So I guess there's a couple of things. I'm happy for this conversation to carry on if people would like to carry on the conversation. The last area I wanted to touch on was kind of what do we think transparency is? Or would you like us to park this until the next meeting? What do people want to do? Are they happy carrying on talking?
I also have a conflict just personally, but if the group wants to carry on, that'd be great too.
Like I say, I'm going to drop off then. If you want to kind of have this thought in the discussion, kind of what does transparency mean? Sorry. Yeah, what does transparency mean to you? You know, LLMs, sort of the earlier ones were more open, whereas as we go to later LLMs, they've kind of closed. Do we think this is good, bad, and what you know, what does it really mean to be open and transparent?
I could do a dropping off to go on another call, actually, Matthew.
Okay, a couple of people have said let's park it, and I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
So we'll bring that up next time then. That's great. Thank you everyone for joining. I appreciate your time today and great input. We'll speak again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Matthew.
Bye.
Bye.